Welcome to a deep dive
Oh, a deep dive.
into one of the most impactful crimes of the 20th century, the assassination of Sergei Kirov.
Wow.
This is a story full of twists and turns and lingering mysteries.
Yeah.
And today, we're going to unpack it all,
Right.
layer by layer.
I'm excited.
I am too.
What's fascinating about this case is how a single event,
Right.
a murder in a Leningrad hallway,
Mm.
had repercussions that echoed throughout the Soviet Union
Wow.
and even shaped the global political landscape for decades.
It's pretty incredible when you think about it.
It really is.
Kirov wasn't just another face in the crowd, was he?
No, definitely not.
He wasn't simply some low-level bureaucrat.
Right.
This was the secretary of the Leningrad Party, a member of the Politburo,
Wow.
the highest decision-making body in the Communist Party. Some even saw him as Stalin's potential successor.
That's right. And what makes this case so intriguing is that the official narrative about who was behind the murder shifted dramatically over time. First, the finger was pointed at various opposition groups,
Okay.
but the story didn't end there.
Of course not.
There's much more to it.
It really is like a political thriller, you know?
Yeah.
A whodunit with incredibly high stakes.
Absolutely.
We've got a stack of incredible sources for you today.
Oh, great.
Excerpts from Robert Conquest's Stalin and the Kirov Murder.
That's a classic.
Some chilling first-hand accounts from those who lived through that period. And even snippets from Khrushchev's famous secret speech.
That's amazing.
All of these paint a very complex and, frankly, disturbing picture.
Yes, it's a dark chapter.
Yeah.
By examining these sources, we're going to dissect the evolving narratives, the evidence, and the contradictions.
Yeah.
But most importantly, we'll explore the lasting impact of Kirov's assassination.
Okay, let's set the stage then.
Right.
Picture the Soviet Union in 1934.
Okay, 1934.
Stalin, after consolidating his power, is firmly in control. But political tensions are simmering beneath the surface.
Of course.
And Sergei Kirov is a rising star in the Communist Party.
Right.
Popular in Leningrad and gaining influence nationally.
Yes, and Kirov's personality really adds another layer of complexity here.
Okay, how so?
He was often viewed as more moderate than Stalin,
Oh, interesting.
more open to different opinions. He advocated for bringing back former opposition figures
Really?
who had been exiled or imprisoned,
Wow.
and even had some fundamental disagreements with Stalin
Okay, like what?
on key issues like collectivization.
Collectivization, that brutal restructuring of agriculture, which caused widespread famine and suffering.
Right.
They disagreed on that.
They did.
Wow.
What about this business about potential relations with Nazi Germany?
Oh, yeah. Imagine if there was a different approach to the Nazis.
It's a tantalizing what-if in history.
It really is.
We can't say for sure what would have happened,
Right.
but it highlights the potential significance of Kirov's position and his contrasting viewpoints.
Yeah.
What we do know is that Kirov's murder became the justification for Stalin's Great Terror.
The Great Terror, those devastating purges that decimated the Communist Party, the military, and anyone perceived as a threat, real or imagined.
Absolutely.
We're talking millions of people.
Millions.
Executed.
Imprisoned.
Imprisoned.
Or sent to the Gulag.
Sent to the Gulag.
It really was a reign of terror.
It was.
That shaped Soviet society for decades. It all starts with this one murder.
Precisely. So let's take a closer look at where it all began.
Okay.
The Smolny Institute in Leningrad. You've probably seen pictures of it.
Yeah, actually.
A majestic building facing the Neva River.
It's stunning. This former school for aristocratic girls had been transformed into a political hub.
Yes.
The headquarters of the Leningrad Party. Exactly.
So we're talking about an important place
Yes.
packed with political power.
Backed with political power.
And that's where it happened.
That's where it happened.
On December 1st, 1934.
December 1st, 1934.
Sergei Kirov is walking down a hallway in the Smolny Institute
Okay.
when he's approached by Leonid Nikolaev, a disgruntled ex-party member.
Right.
Nikolaev pulls out a revolver.
Oh, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Before you go any further,
Okay.
help me out here.
Sure.
Smolny was a heavily guarded building.
Right.
The center of power in Leningrad.
Yeah.
How does some disgruntled guy just stroll in
Yeah.
and get close enough to shoot Kirov?
Right. He was a top party official.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And it's one of the many mysteries surrounding this case.
Oh, really?
There are conflicting accounts about the security measures that day and how Nikolaev managed to gain access to Kirov.
Okay.
Some reports even suggest there was more than one shot fired.
Why?
Adding to the confusion.
More than one shot fired.
That's what some reports say.
Okay, so we've got a confusing crime scene.
Oh, we do.
What happens next? What happens in the immediate aftermath?
Stalin himself arrives in Leningrad very quickly.
Oh, wow.
And takes personal charge of the investigation.
Really?
And here's where things take a dark turn.
Uh-oh.
Almost immediately, the leadership of the Leningrad NKVD is purged.
Hold on. The NKVD.
Yeah.
For those of us not up on our Soviet acronyms, help us out here.
Of course.
Who are the NKVD?
They were the People's Commissariat for Internal Affairs.
Okay.
Think of them as Stalin's secret police.
Oh, okay.
Responsible for state security.
Right.
And carrying out those infamous purges we talked about.
So why purge them so quickly?
Right.
It seems a little suspicious, don't you think?
This swift and brutal purge of the Leningrad NKVD raises all sorts of red flags.
Red flags like what?
It makes you wonder if there was something more going on.
Okay.
Something they wanted to cover up.
A cover-up. Okay, this is where things start to get really interesting.
It sure is. So it's crucial to understand how the official story of the Kirov assassination went through multiple transformations.
Oh, really?
Each time weaving a more elaborate conspiracy.
So they found a convenient scapegoat with the NKVD?
Right.
But that was just the beginning.
Exactly.
The story kept evolving, getting bigger and more sinister. It's almost like they were making it up as they went along.
You're picking up on a key point there. Initially, Nikolaev the assassin claimed personal motivations.
Personal motivation.
He even detailed his grievances in a diary.
Okay.
Portraying himself as a disgruntled individual acting alone.
Right.
But that narrative quickly morphed.
Okay.
Shifting to suggest a broader conspiracy.
A broader conspiracy.
And eventually implicating the NKVD itself.
Okay, so walk me through these different versions of the story.
Okay.
Help me keep track of all these shifting narratives.
Sure.
What were the main stories that the Soviet authorities put forward?
Let's start with the first iteration of the official story.
Okay.
This version focused on what they call the Leningrad Center.
The Leningrad Center.
A supposed group of Zinoviev supporters plotting to overthrow the government.
Okay.
Some of these individuals were Nikolaev's acquaintances, and others were former leaders of the Komsomol.
The Komsomol, that was the youth wing of the Communist Party, right?
Right.
Basically the young communists.
Yes.
So they're saying that this group of disgruntled former Komsomol members and Zinoviev supporters, some of whom Nikolaev knew, were behind the assassination.
That's the gist of it.
But of course, it didn't stop there.
No.
The story, as they say, developed.
The story developed.
I bet it did. So what happened next? How did this Leningrad Center narrative evolve?
In the next version of the story, they introduced the concept of a Moscow Center.
A Moscow Center.
Yes, this took things to a whole new level.
Okay.
Directly linking Zinoviev and Kamenev.
Zinoviev and Kamenev.
Two prominent figures from the early days of the Bolshevik Revolution.
Hang on a second. Zinoviev and Kamenev, those were big names.
I know, right?
They were old Bolsheviks, part of Lenin's inner circle.
Oh, exactly.
But they'd already been sidelined by Stalin years earlier.
Yeah.
Are you telling me they were suddenly brought back into the picture as the masterminds behind Kirov's assassination?
Yes. That's precisely what the authorities claimed.
Wow.
They were accused of leading this clandestine Moscow Center, supposedly orchestrating terror attacks and plotting to overthrow the government.
It seems incredibly convenient that Stalin's main rivals, these old Bolsheviks who posed a potential threat, just happened to be behind this assassination.
That's a valid observation, and the story gets even more convoluted.
Oh, no.
Remember Trotsky?
Trotsky.
He was Lenin's right-hand man and Stalin's main rival.
Right.
In the power struggle after Lenin's death.
Yeah.
Well, the third iteration of the story, they brought Trotsky into the picture.
Trotsky? Wasn't he already in exile?
He was.
How could he be involved in a plot in Leningrad?
Well, the authorities accused him of joining forces with Zinoviev and Kamenev.
Wow.
To create a united Trotskyites Zinovievite center.
Okay.
This, they claimed, was a massive conspiracy aimed at carrying out a campaign of terror.
Oh, wow.
And overthrowing Stalin's regime.
So let me get this straight.
Okay.
They're saying that these three figures, Zinoviev, Kamenev, and Trotsky, who were already either dead, imprisoned, or in exile.
Exactly.
We're all working together to mastermind this grand conspiracy.
That's what they said.
It sounds a little far-fetched, don't you think?
It certainly stretches the limits of credibility.
Yeah.
And it's worth noting that these accusations were used to justify a series of highly publicized show trials.
Ah, the show trials. Those were carefully staged events, weren't they?
Yes.
Designed to publicly humiliate and condemn these so-called enemies of the state.
Precisely, these trials were more about propaganda.
Right.
And consolidating Stalin's power than about finding the truth.
They actually held 3 big show trials using the Kirov murder as justification.
3.
Each time, they added new layers of conspiracy and accused more high-ranking people.
Yes, it was like watching a macabre theatrical production.
Yeah.
With the script constantly being rewritten.
And if we analyze these evolving narratives, we start to see all sorts of problems. Inconsistencies, changing details, characters disappearing from the story, shifting motives. It's a mess.
It's a mess.
Not to mention the whole issue of forced confessions.
Oh, of course.
That was a trademark of Stalin's regime.
Absolutely.
Extract confessions through torture, coercion, and psychological pressure.
Right.
Then present them as evidence in these show trials. It was a sham.
Absolutely. The trials relied heavily on these coerced confessions.
Right.
Which were often riddled with contradictions and obvious fabrications.
But in Stalin's Soviet Union, evidence didn't really matter.
No, it didn't.
When it came to eliminating rivals and solidifying his grip on power.
Exactly.
So we've got these constantly shifting narratives.
Yes.
These show trials designed to eliminate anyone deemed a threat to Stalin's power. And the whole thing hinges on this one event.
Right.
The assassination of Sergei Kirov.
It all comes back to that.
But let's go back to some of those intriguing details you mentioned earlier.
Okay.
What about this business with the purged Leningrad NKVD being sent to Kolyma but with special treatment?
Right.
That doesn't sound like a typical punishment.
No, it doesn't.
For people deemed responsible for such a major security failure.
You're right. Kolyma was one of the most brutal labor camps in the Gulag system.
Right.
Notorious for its harsh conditions and high death rate.
Yeah.
So why would they send the purged NKVD officers there?
Yeah.
Only to give them relatively comfortable positions.
Exactly.
It doesn't add up.
It's almost like they were being protected.
Right.
Hidden away, but not really punished. As if they knew something that could be damaging to the official narrative.
It's possible.
What about Kirov's bodyguard, Borisov?
Yes.
The one whose death was conveniently labeled an accident.
That's another detail that raises serious questions.
Yeah.
Was Borisov silenced to prevent him from revealing information? That could challenge the official story.
Right.
We may never know for sure.
And then there's Khrushchev's famous secret speech in 1956.
Yes.
5 years after Stalin's death.
Right.
He finally admitted that there were serious problems with the official accounts of the Kirov murder.
He did.
And he even hinted that a deeper investigation was needed.
That speech was a bombshell.
It was.
It was the first time a Soviet leader publicly acknowledged the deep flaws in the official narrative of the Kirov case and the show trials that followed.
But even after Khrushchev's revelations, there was no real effort to revisit those cases.
Right.
The authorities seemed content to let sleeping dogs lie.
It seems so.
Perhaps because reopening those wounds would have revealed the extent of the lies and manipulation.
Exactly.
At the heart of Stalin's regime.
It's a fascinating and disturbing puzzle.
It really is.
And it leads us to a crucial question.
Which is?
Who benefited most from the Kirov assassination?
Well, it seems pretty obvious, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Stalin was the one who gained the most from Kirov's death.
Exactly. The elimination of Kirov removed a potential rival.
Right.
A figure who had growing popularity and could have challenged Stalin's authority.
And the assassination provided the perfect excuse to launch the Great Terror.
Yes.
To eliminate anyone perceived as a threat.
Precisely, the Kirov murder became the catalyst for a wave of repression that would transform the Soviet Union into a totalitarian state.
Wow.
Ruled by fear and paranoia.
But it's also important to look beyond the immediate political benefits.
That's true.
What do you mean? The Kirov assassination had a profound psychological impact on Soviet society. It created a climate of suspicion and distrust.
Where anyone could be accused of being an enemy of the people.
Wow.
It was a turning point that marked the beginning of an era of terror and repression.
Right.
That would last for decades.
It's chilling to think about the lasting impact of this one event.
It really is.
Kirov's murder wasn't just a personal tragedy.
Right.
It was a turning point for the entire Soviet system.
For the whole system.
It's like a virus was injected into the very core of the Soviet Union. A virus of suspicion and fear that spread throughout society.
And that virus didn't stay contained within Soviet borders.
Oh, really?
The purges, justified by this fabricated conspiracy surrounding Kirov's death, not only decimated the Soviet elite, but also sowed distrust of the USSR on the international stage.
Wow.
It fueled tensions with the West and cast a long shadow over global politics for decades to come.
We've talked about how Stalin benefited from Kirov's assassination.
Right.
But what about the Soviet people?
Yeah, what about them?
What about the countless individuals who were swept up in the purges? Accused of being enemies of the state based on flimsy evidence, coerced confessions, and outright lies.
The human cost of the Kirov murder is incalculable.
Yeah.
It's not just about the numbers, the millions executed, imprisoned, or sent to the gulag.
Right.
It's about the families torn apart, the lives destroyed, the potential snuffed out.
Right. It's about the fear that permeated every aspect of Soviet life.
Right.
The chilling effect it had on free thought, creativity, and dissent.
Exactly.
We've seen this pattern repeated throughout history, haven't we?
We have.
A single event, often shrouded in mystery or deliberately manipulated, becomes the catalyst for a wave of repression and violence.
Yes, think about the Reichstag fire in Nazi Germany.
Oh, right.
Or the Gulf of Tonkin incident that escalated the Vietnam War.
It's a sobering reminder of how easily truth can be distorted.
Right.
To serve the interests of those in power.
And the Kirov murder serves as a stark warning.
Okay.
About the danger of unchecked power and the manipulation of information.
So what can we learn from this?
When those in authority can control the narrative, shape the story that people believe,
right,
they can justify almost anything.
Yeah.
They can silence dissent, eliminate rivals, and create a climate of fear that prevents any challenge to their rule.
It's a crucial lesson for us today in a world where information is constantly being bombarded at us from all directions.
It is.
We need to be critical thinkers.
Yes.
To question the narratives we're being presented with.
Absolutely.
To look for evidence and to demand transparency from those in power.
Right.
We can't afford to be passive consumers of information.
We can't.
Especially when it comes to issues of justice and human rights.
Absolutely. We have a responsibility to learn from these historical tragedies, to recognize the signs of manipulation and propaganda, and to stand up for the truth.
Right.
We must be vigilant in safeguarding open societies where dissenting voices are heard, evidence is examined critically, and justice prevails over political expediency.
So, as we conclude this deep dive into the Kirov murder, I'm left with a sense of unease.
Yeah.
We've uncovered layer upon layer of intrigue, conflicting accounts, and deliberate obfuscation.
Well, yeah.
We may never know the full truth about what happened that day in the Smolny Institute.
Right.
But one thing is clear.
What's that?
This wasn't just a random act of violence.
No, it wasn't.
It was a pivotal event, meticulously exploited to consolidate power, crush opposition, and usher in an era of terror that would scar the Soviet Union for generations.
And it's a reminder that the past is never truly past.
That's a good point.
The echoes of these events can still be felt today in the way information is controlled and manipulated, in the rise of authoritarianism, and in the ongoing struggle for truth and justice.
It's a struggle that demands our attention, our critical thinking, and our unwavering commitment to the principles of freedom and democracy.
It does.
So keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep the spirit of critical thinking alive.
Yes, keep diving deep.
Until next time, folks, keep diving deep.